Hey, what's up YouTube gaming family? It is K-Rod here. I'm back at it with another video. This video is going to be a pretty interesting video for y'all today. I wanted to make this video to dedicate a potential storyline rework of Mortal Kombat 1, and I'm going to have this designated towards a particular YouTuber that's a very good YouTuber that I suggest all of you go check out. His name is the WaveReport. I'll have his name basically tagged within the video title, so that way you guys can go check it out. I'll just basically have this video made, put some music in the background, and just chop it up with my own ideas. So yeah, let's talk about it. Mortal Kombat 1 storyline, for those of you that all know, Liu Kang rebooted the whole entire realm, and the thing about this storyline was that I kind of wish it wasn't set like this. I think honestly, when it comes down to it, it's more to do with like what is considered like the proper storyline, and ideally I'm sorry, it would have been better if this game was set up in the very ancient time realm where the very first Mortal Kombat tournament was being held. So here's my whole storyline breakdown for this. How I would have made this tournament set up is that I would have gone back to the very first ever tournament. How I would have structured this is that this tournament should have been designated in a way where the Great Kung Lao should have been the main roster character to start it out. For those of you that don't know who the Great Kung Lao is, he is the main ancestor of the Shaolin monks that hold Kung Lao's family ancestry. And how that works is that the hat that you see at a Kung Lao, that's a ancestral weapon that was probably passed down through other great ancestors that were very strong before the egotistical Kung Lao that you see. But how that works is that the Great Kung Lao was basically like a really good, heavily trained Shaolin monk warrior, and he possessed a really strong basis for his skill set and abilities to be the character that you see out of Kung Lao. Now, his moves per se of how he obtained them, I want to say it probably had to be something with maybe Shaolin based abilities where the blue energy that you see out of Kung Lao's hat, that probably was inherited through some sort of souls that were probably put together through Earthrealm. So I mean, that's just my particular thoughts. I think that would have made proper sense, and I think that's a pretty good sell for the storyline in terms of how Kung Lao should be written. Kung Lao is supposed to be one of the strongest warriors next to Liu Kang, and Liu Kang's ancestry is basically related to Kung Lao, in which both Liu Kang and Kung Lao canonically are basically cousins. And how that works is that Liu Kang's ancestors were basically brought in the same fashion next to Kung Lao's ancestry. And I would say in terms of how this works is that Liu Kang basically resets the timeline from MK11, and what happens is that Liu Kang runs into the Great Kung Lao, and he basically trains the Great Kung Lao to be his very first champion for Earthrealm. Now, how this works out in the future is that the Great Kung Lao works, his way to being a really heavily top-tier level fighter. Now, as the tournament is about to begin, Liu Kang needs to find more recruits, and I would say for the recruits, for his Forces of Light, which that's basically the team that you have set up for the tournament for the people of Earthrealm, representing Earthrealm as the combatants. And then same thing with Outworld and all the other realms. But just to make this simplistic, Liu Kang's tournament crew would have to consist of his team that he selects. So I would have the Great Kung Lao be number 1, That's my first pick. Number 2 would definitely be Raiden, but Raiden would be pretty much like Lord Raiden on the come up, and I think Raiden would basically be, Liu Kang's second champion. And then I would also bring in Shijinko, which he would be a very, very good character for the story. I would have, I don't even know who the other characters should be, because there's so many good characters in the story. If we want to probably maybe bring in Taven and Dagon, I think those are good characters, because Argus and Delia could also play like a role in the story. I think all 4 of those characters should probably be in it. And then I would probably also add in Scorpion, but this Scorpion is not the Hanzo Hasashi that you see, which I would have Hanzo Hasashi be Scorpion, but it would be 2 different Scorpions. But the very first Scorpion in the new timeline would be Grandmaster Takeda. And if you guys don't know who he is, he was the very first person that started the Shirai Ryu clan.
Moderate Mark Productions.
That broke away from the Lin Kuei, which I would also bring in another character off of the villain side, off of Earthrealm. If you guys don't know him, his name is Onairo, which that is Sector's father that started the Lin Kuei. So basically, I would have Onairo. I would bring in Grandmaster Takeda. He would be basically like Scorpion in the sense of he has all the skills, he has all the knowledge to basically be the Lin Kuei's best assassin, so that'll start out with the storyline. But then Liu Kang will, basically, give him that knowledge for him to be the new Hanzo Hasashi Scorpion, in which Hanzo is going to come to the story. But how Grandmaster Takeda, is connected to Hanzo is that I would say Hanzo is trained by Grandmaster Takeda. So how that would work out is that Grandmaster Takeda would compete on Liu Kang's team to become his combatants to compete in the tournament. And then the Lin Kuei would have, a lot of fear and anger towards Grandmaster Takeda. So what would happen is that Grandmaster Takeda would compete in the very first tournament along with Shijinko and all the other characters that I mentioned, the Great Kung Lao and everybody else included, in which the other characters that I would probably put in would probably be, I don't know, I don't mind putting in Fujin. I think Fujin makes perfect sense, because canon-wise, Fujin would be a really good pick for the story, because Fujin would also work with Liu Kang to basically prioritize the plan to defeat, Shao Kahn, Shang Tsung, and, all the other evil characters like Quan Chi, and I'd probably say other people that could be in that mix, like Reiko and all those guys. How this story basically is to be written out is that after the first tournament is over with, there is backlash from the villain side, which in the villains team roster, I would definitely put in Grandmaster, I would put in Grandmaster Sub-Zero, which it wouldn't be Bihan. I would say Bihan would be next to his father. So Grandmaster Sub-Zero would be the father of both Kuai Liang and Bihan. And I would say how this works out is that the very first tournament is fought with the Great Kung Lao going up against Goro and all the other bad people. And then other combatants would be Bihan's father, that being Grandmaster Sub-Zero, which I would say, I don't want to say he would be a bad person. I would put him on the good side, but there would be a twist to it. So Sub-Zero's father would compete with Liu Kang, and they would go up against Shang Tsung and all the other bad characters in the story. And how it all pans out to be is that after the first tournament is over, there is to be potential backlash, backstabbing through I guess certain characters that want to have power. So let's just say from this point on in the story, we would have characters such as Bihan becoming evil, which which I would say canonically or canon-wise, he would probably end up killing his father. In which I think that makes perfect sense because his father made pretty much like the Lin Kuei for what it is, but how it all works out is that his father and Grandmaster Chiquita work together to fight against Oneiro's crew, that being him and Sector, which I would say Sector would be the son, but this would not be like basically the lead up to the Lin Kuei's cyber initiative, which I probably wouldn't go that far because this is basically leading to the very first Mortal Kombat tournament. So this is basically step one before we're going into the new era. So within the old timeline, I would say it would make sense to prioritize the characters in a way which that the Great Kung Lao, he has his run, he showcases his skills and abilities, but let's just say Goro ends up, dying, or he ends up losing in the tournament, but probably sometime throughout the story, the Great Kung Lao ends up, getting killed off by Goro, and then it basically turns into a massive warfare between Shang Tsung teaming up with Shao Kahn and the rest of the evil villains, where it's it's like a massive war of all the world's strongest Mortal Kombat characters. And then how it goes from that point on is that it turns into a MK9 scenario where it shows you all of the backstories of every character that comes out to be. I would also put a Reptile into the story, but I would have multiple different characters coming out of Reptile's clan. Out of the story and people, I would put in Reptile, I would put in Chameleon, and yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah. Put Reptile and Chameleon. I probably put the female and male version inside the story. I think that makes perfect sense. Because if you do think about it, this is before Syzoth ever came. So I would say the brother and sister of the Chameleon Brotherhood would come in, but I would probably put in a different variation of a Reptile that is like Syzoth, but this character is more cunning. He's more, I would say power driven, where he wants to take care of his people, but it would basically showcase the good and bad side out of the particular character that's being promoted before Syzoth ever comes, because this Reptile should be a Saurian, I would say a warmonger, type of character. So I would say that's a pretty good look for Reptile. But how it all works out is that Syzoth comes later after the very first Mortal Kombat tournament, leading into the MK9 storyline timeline. So as far as the Great Kung Lao story goes, he would have to end up fighting Goro, and then he beats Goro in the very first tournament. But then Goro ends up, probably killing him, which I would say, this is a rebooted timeline, so I can't just go off of the original storyline and just say, okay, if Goro ends up just doing the same thing to Kung Lao, what does that mean for Kung Lao's family dynasty or his bloodline? I would say that would just still end up being the same process, but it would have to be something in which let's just say Goro ends up losing. I would probably have to include Goro's father, because his father would make a perfect character for the storyline, which King Gorbak and Goro basically run Mortal Kombat, and Goro works hand in hand with his father to find a means to defeat the Earth Realmers, and that would be a pretty good story. I would personally like it. You know, I think it's a really good addition to that storyline. But that's how I would probably write it out for Goro, because Goro is supposed to be one of, you know, Outworld's strongest competitors, and he's like the longest reigning undefeated champion. So the Great Khala would have his run. He would end up, you know, being victorious, but later down the story, he would end up getting killed by either Goro or King Gorbek. So I would have him have his shine, and then he would end up dying. But then Shang Tsung works alongside with Quan Chi to create like the next great deadly like alliance empire, and then Quan Chi would also work with Shao Kahn, in which Shao Kahn would designate his I would say his empire to overthrow Queen I would probably say Queen Sindel, before Sindel standed down in power to give the crown over to Melina and Kitana. So Sindel would basically be like the very first queen out of Outworld, but then leading into the MK9 storyline, or the MK1 storyline that you see with Melina, that would make perfect sense for the storyline to basically prioritize itself. So therefore, there's like a new set of rulers, you know, coming into place. So I would have that, but I would also have King Jared in the storyline, which it would show you the storyline of King Jared, of how he came to be with Sindel, and then it would all go into the overthrow with Shang Tsung killing off King Jared, but King Jared would end up coming back, you know, years later, or thousands of years later, depending on how far the storyline goes, by Shang Tsung along with Shao Kahn taking over the throne, therefore, you know, showcasing like the amounts of, like, I would say the immense corruption out of what the storyline for the Sindel family tree with her and King Jared. So I would do that. And then in terms of Bihan and Kuai Liang, I would have Grandmaster Takeda work alongside with Shijinko in the tournament, where they end up, you know, being victorious and being really good at their skills. How I would go about going with the story, with building them, I would say Takeda, that being the Grandmaster Takeda, would end up, you know, breaking away from the Lin Kuei, and then Onairo, that being, like, you know, like the head of Chief with, I would say, like, operating the Lin Kuei, would go out of his way of wanting to kill Grandmaster Takeda. So the Lin Kuei Lin Kuei would try to work vigorously in trying to take him out. And then let's just say he ends up dying because canon-wise, Takeda ends up getting killed off of, I want to say, his tea getting poisoned. So I would say before he dies, he would then train Hanzo Hasashi, that being the younger version of him, to be the very new, I would say, clan member to run the Shirai Ryu. And then Kuai Liang and Bihan basically take over the spot out of the Lin Kuei, where it shows both of them working together, but then it shows the evil out of Bihan, of which he gets power hungry driven with the amount of, like, you know, corruption that was being fed to him, of how much he wants to, you know, take control out of the Lin Kuei, and he doesn't like what Liu Kang is doing with the storyline, or I guess the timeline per se, of like what, like of what exactly is going on. So I would put that in there. And then for the villains in the story, this is going to be a little bit hard to put out, but I would probably put out Rain in the story. I would put, you know, his ancestor. Well, I would actually just put out Rain, because if I put out a great ancestor of Rain, how would Rain actually be formulated? I would put him in the story. I would put in Goro. I would use Kintaro. I would bring back Onaga, which Onaga would be the he would be the main boss, basically controlling everything. And how it works is that Shang Tsung, Quan Chi, Onaga, all these villains that you can think of, all basically work like they basically work together to formulate a massive like alliance, but then they all backstab like each other for wanting to get power, but it's all for the sake of conquering Liu Kang's timeline to start a war with Earth Realm and all the other realms. But then it all turns into a massive civil war, in which I would also bring in Havoc in the story, because he would make perfect sense for him to be like I would say like the top dog in running the Chaos realm. So I would probably do that, and I would make like the story more interesting per se, to basically prioritize a better I would say like storyline for the characters to be built up a lot faster. So I would do that. I would also probably add in more characters such as I mean, there's like a pretty good amount of like evil characters. I could probably maybe put in I don't know, who are some other good characters. Yeah, hold on, give me 1 sec. Yeah, I would also bring in characters such as Shinnok. Sorry about that, like I had to get something situated with like my thoughts. I would bring in Shinnok, and then I would basically designate like the whole ultimate like alliance of like all the evil characters, plotting up against each other, where they would have a massive power structure alliance, and then it would just basically fall apart of them wanting to fight each other out. So I would probably have something just like that, make it more interesting, make the storyline more competitive, but also showcase like the evil of all the characters. Other villains I would probably add in would probably be Motaro, probably Baraka. I would probably make him evil, but then he would end up being good, so it would probably show his great ancestor being evil, and then he probably ends up getting some good chapter runs within like the story. But then like leading into a different timeline, he ends up being a better person through like a different variation of him. So as far as what the storyline goes with I guess like the main villains, I would definitely put in Onaga to be like the really big bad character in the story. So I would definitely make him a more powerful character, where he has more of like a say of like what goes on within his storyline. But how it all works out is that Shijinko ends up prioritizing I guess like Onaga's plans without even knowing, and Shijinko ends up fighting Shang Tsung in the storyline to stop Shang Tsung's plans from prioritizing domination over Earth Realm and all the other realms. I would then have Onaga use like social engineering, mind control over Shijinko, where Shijinko ends up feeding Onaga to his ideals, and then Onaga ends up cursing him, where Shijinko did not understand what was going on, through Onaga's I would say like spell per se. It would basically be like Damashi that he summons, but he would just use like a certain means of a social engineering for him to be successful. So I think that's something that I would do. But how Onaga ends up taking over is that he ends up becoming a lot stronger by getting the Kamido Goose put together, and then as he obtains them, he ends up fighting the Great Kung Lao, and then I'm sorry. he ends up fighting Shijinko at the very new timeline that is to be formed, and then as that is developing within a fight, that prioritizes the storyline to be bigger for the characters. So therefore, when Shujinko fights Onaga along with Raiden, in which I forgot to add in Raiden in the story, Raiden ends up doing what he needed to do to be to be the Raiden that he is, but he would end up being a thunder god to prioritize his character development to be like another prominent character within the storyline. And then Kung Lao, that being Kung Lao's ancestor, that being, you know, the egotistical one, he's in the story to progress his skill sets of what he is in the story. But as he develops himself to be stronger, he ends up seeing the true scale out of his ancestors. But I would probably end up, you know, getting Kung Lao killed off by Shao Kahn, in which Shao Kahn ends up taking him out, and then Liu Kang, you know, gets enraged and furious to wanting to get revenge on Shao Kahn. So Raiden ends up, you know, he ends up being motivated by wanting to, you know, avenge Kung Lao's death. So he ends up fighting Shao Kahn and he defeats him, but Shao Kahn ends up, basically fighting Raiden to a stalemate, and then he ends up teaming up with Shang Tsung to, you know, obtain more power. So therefore he can get more souls, and then as he does that, that makes Shao Kahn into a much more destructive threat. So as that develops his character more, he ends up invading Outworld once again to then overthrow Melina's army, in which Melina, she would end up taking the power of King Jared's throne after Jared had been killed off by Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn. But Jared would come back. He would come back in terms of, you know, some sorcery spelling that would be created by Quan Chi, that being Ermac, you know, coming into existence. But Jared would also, you know, come back through some, like, I would say, like, regeneration type of resurrection of necromancy. So I would try to put like a twist to it, like Jared is to be, you know, returned in the story, but he prioritizes himself to be a much stronger, you know, character, in which he is out to get revenge on Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn in the story. I would try to make it interesting like that. I would give Jared, you know, his own spotlight, but Jared would be like the type of character where he's like, okay, Shao Kahn and Shang Tsung took me out, so now I have to go back and get vengeance on the people that have done me wrong to my people. So I would do that. I would try to make it interesting, you know, for King Jared. So therefore King Jared can be a much stronger character. But he also works with Liu Kang and Sindel and everybody within the story to go after Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn. But I would say in the final battle, it would be Shao Kahn fighting King Jared, and King Jared ends up defeating him. But the cost would be that Shao Kahn places like a curse on him that kills him. So it was like I would kind of like turn it into like a sacrifice type of fight where they both go at it with each other, but Shao Kahn has like a massive, like, you know, damage buff curse that gives him, you know, some like abilities to like be invulnerable to his like attacks. But it would be interesting enough to to the point in which King Jared would have all the means to be powerful to fight Shao Kahn, but Shao Kahn would basically, like, you know, be stronger than him in the sense of he's gained more abilities than Jared, but Jared would basically sacrifice himself to kill Shao Kahn. It would be like a Nightwolf scenario when he fought Sindel when she was evil, when Shao Kahn decided to bring her back through Shang Tsung's, I would say, magic, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Or actually, no, it was Quan Chi. Quan Chi, you know, followed the orders of Shao Kahn, and then, you know, Quan Chi went out to like some desert in which, you know, Sindel was buried with her body being sacrificed, in which she did that because she fought Onaga, which I would probably, like, you know, put Onaga into like the newer timeline, because like if you just try to like add that into like the story to showcase Onaga being once powerful, but then he ends up losing to Sindel, in which Sindel, she would give her backstory of like why she ended up killing him, in which I would probably put that in there to showcase like how powerful Onaga really is. And then after that, it would kind of showcase the whole prioritized framework of how the storyline would go. But then Onaga would kind of like have his reign of terror to be like, ha ha ha, I am now back. Nobody can stop me. I am, the Dragon King. And then he would end up probably fighting like Shang Tsung. He ends up killing him. And then he ends up bringing back his Dragon King army, which that would make him really powerful. And that would be like a really good storyline. But then Shujinko would be like the final, character to only, fight up against him. And I wouldn't mind putting him Raiden, into like the fight, but Onaga would be stronger than him in the sense of Raiden tried everything that he could to try defeating him. But I would make it interesting enough to like the storyline in which Onaga, he is powerful, but he isn't like supremely powerful to like the level of which he would prioritize himself. So I would probably set it up just like that. In terms of Sub-Zero, I would definitely have Bihan be corrupted by power of wanting to be put into that, a segment of wanting to make the Lin Kuei stronger. So I would definitely make the Lin Kuei a lot stronger in terms of where things will go of what Bihan wants. So let's just say his father ends up, leading the Lin Kuei, and then the Lin Kuei ends up, getting corrupted, in which I would say like Bihan would also kill his father too, because remind you, Bihan actually makes a statement within, a versus battle where, he says like die like my father. So I would say like that should be put into like the story. And then Grandmaster Takeda ends up leading the Shirai Ryu to be created. And then he then trains Hanzo Hasashi before he passes like away. So Hanzo would be another big player out of like the Shirai Ryu. So I would make that like a part of like the story. And then Hanzo would end up being, I would say how should I say it? I would make Hanzo a very good prominent character within like the storyline, but I wouldn't like try to like prioritize his character to be like supremely how should I say, like tormented. I would say if anything, Hanzo is to be the assassin ninja that you see, but then he ends up getting corrupted with Quan Chi's magic, which then turns him evil into Scorpion, which Bihan will end up killing him, which is, something out of like the storyline that should be prioritized. And when that does happen, Hanzo wants to get revenge on Bihan for quote-unquote killing his family, but it would be Quan Chi to be the target, not Bihan. But how Bihan ends up becoming a corrupted noob Saibot, it would be set up in the way of Bihan having to be I would say killed off by Havoc, and then Havoc turns him into noob by showcasing him the powers of what it means to be chaotically controlled by the Netherrealm. And how that is to be structured is that Havoc works with Quan Chi to say, hey, how about you give me Bihan as my new test subject. And then what he ends up doing is that he ends up capturing Bihan into that trap, and then that makes Bihan like the stronger character for him to develop his story within the storyline. So that's how I would try to build I would try to build Bihan to mix up with the storyline, but Bihan would be more corrupted, because when he becomes Noob Saibot, it would now go back to square one of like, okay, I used to be like a really good-hearted individual until I wanted to kill my father, and then his brother Kuai Liang would take over the Lin Kuei. He would reform it, and the Lin Kuei would be structured in which like there would be order within the Lin Kuei in which Kuai Liang turns it into a better organization, but the Lin Kuei is not structured in the way of, you know, I would say like what people would try to make it out to be, to say like, okay, it was once evil and now it's just going to fight for Earthrealm. I would say Kuai Liang would make the Lin Kuei into a defensive force, and then, you know, he would want to get revenge against his brother because his brother ended up being corrupted, and he wanted to basically, you know, bring justice, you know, back to his brother. But he would also fight Hanzo Hasashi, because Hanzo Hasashi would be, I would basically say, corrupted by the evil of Quan Chi's magic. Because like let's just say, you know, like I would just probably say like let's just say if Hanzo ends up killing Kuai Liang's, like, I don't know, wife, which would be Harumi, and let's just say if Harumi was once Hanzo's wife, and let's just say Harumi ends up getting killed by Quan Chi, and then he ends up lying to him to say, you know what, Kuai Liang did it. And then Kuai Liang is with Harumi, in which Harumi ends up being pushed, you know, in a direction of not knowing who Hanzo is. So I would try to formulate, you know, the story just like that. I would make the story very competitive. I would try to mix it up in a way of which the characters actually have a backstory, and there's a proper segment in which it shows that the characters to be mixed up in a different mode of fashion. So I would say that's how the characters should be. It should be set up in which you know, there is variety within all the characters, you know, like Shijinko, King Jared, and all those guys. So I would try to make the story just like that. So I would say that's pretty much it for that portion of the story. But how I would try to like end it all off in the storyline is that Havoc, Shijinko, Onaga, Shang Tsung, and Shao Kahn are the main villains in the story, and the main heroes of the story that that prioritize what the story to be, you know, a more prominent figure would be like yeah, I would probably say like Shao Kahn, Shang Tsung, Quan Chi. Like I would say there's like a lot of characters that you could put in, and I would say, you know, the characters in the story, you know, would definitely prioritize a lot better. So I would say that's something that I would do. I would try to make the story, you know, competitive, and I would try to twist it up to have good variety in the story. So I mean, that's what I would try to do, and I think that's a really good setup. And then on top of that, I forgot to add in Sonya and Jax, but I didn't want to put them in there because we're talking about like the ancient timeline leading into the old generational timeline of the very newest timeline before Chronica. So it would kind of lead into the very first characters that originated the very first characters of who they were. So, you know, if what the Great Sub-Zero is to be Grandmaster Sub-Zero, or that being Grandmaster Bihan, you know, Senior, then Bihan Senior would be the father of Kuai Liang and Bihan. So that would be a pretty good twist to the story. I would also include other characters such as Grandmaster Takeda. I would put in Boraicho. I think Boraicho makes perfect sense in the story. Taven and Dagon will definitely play a role in the story. I would put in other characters such as like Hotaru. Maybe add in Nightwolf. I don't know too much about thinking Nightwolf would be like a pretty good selection, because this is like talking about like the very first ever characters that were to be, you know, talked about, like, you know, canon wise about the very first Mortal Kombat tournament. So I think in terms of how I see it, that is a good way to start, and, you know, I think that's a good way to prioritize, you know, like the storyline. So I think that is something in which that the storyline can prioritize itself. And yeah, so I would say to end it all off, it's going to have to be Onaga being the big bad guy to take over the story. And then when Onaga tries to gain his power to become the most strongest character, he would end up killing off a good amount of the roster. But I would also probably maybe add in, Sindel, definitely put in Melina, and I would say that's a pretty good way to, basically, twine out the story. And then when I have that placed into the storyline, I would then make a expansion story talking about all the other characters, like Noob Saibot, maybe have more of Havoc where he works in line with all the other villains, but it would basically be Onaga being like the major big player out of who he is as a character. And then I would probably have Argus, Delia, and who else? Taven and Dagon, and I would probably maybe put in Blaze. I think Blaze would be a pretty good pick for the storyline. So I think that's a pretty good, setup for the story. So yeah, I think there's a lot to work with. So I think in terms of the storyline, that's what I would do to try to make the storyline better. And I would probably make Liu Kang, the prominent figure next to Garrus to make the storyline more competitive. But the main roster characters that would be the biggest threat story-wise would be Onaga, Shao Kahn, Shang Tsung, Quan Chi. Those characters I would definitely add in, and it would be a really good setup to the story. So it's not something that is going to be easy to prioritize. So I think that's something that MK storyline definitely needs to be fixed up. But just to give you a little gist of how I'm thinking, I would make the storyline very, very nostalgic, where a lot of these characters have a lot of good they have a lot of good background for who they are. And it would be a very competitive storyline in which it shows you the good, bad, and the ugly out of all characters. I'm pretty sure other characters that you guys wanted me to mention, such as Jade, Shiva, and all those characters, I would like to add in other characters such as Motaro and all those characters. But the problem is we're trying to basically prioritize a storyline in which basically the Great Kung Lao is to be the main guy out of the MK roster. And how it all works out is that the Great Kung Lao has his run, and he ends up being victorious in the very first tournament, but then he ends up dying to let's just say Goro or whoever. And it would set up a story in which the Great Kung Lao has his run, and then it shows you Kung Lao's goal to basically seek out vengeance for his ancestors' death. So I would try to make it really interesting. I would try to make the story in which the storyline has some meaning, and it would give some proper meaning to the story. So I just think that's what the story should be. And yeah, I think what the storyline would definitely benefit pretty well. So that's just something how I'm trying to hash it out inside my mind. But I think having that setup with the Great Kung Lao leading into Liu Kang's storyline that you see now with MK1, with a little bit of tweaks, I would still have Sector and Cyrax being males. I don't want to see them as females, but if the females do come, that would be different variations of them being the Titans per se. So I think that's a pretty good set of story hashing. I have a lot more to talk about, but I would definitely make Onaga the big bad killer out of the entire movie, set in terms of how I would direct it in the storyline sense. So it would be a very, very tough roster and I would definitely give like every character their shine, but it would definitely prioritize, you know, like the setup of which how all the characters must be in terms of like how they should act, you know, what was their drive before and after, and then they basically have like their run of like what should be prioritized. So I think that's something that the MK universe would benefit pretty well. So I think that's something that would make the storyline far more competitive. And yeah, I think that's how I would structure the Mortal Kombat universe. So yeah, definitely let me know what you guys think. I'm sorry that I went on a little bit too long. Shout out to the WaveReport. If he ever does, you know, check out this video. I'm just trying to give out like my base thoughts of like what I could do to reshape the storyline, but that's how I would do it. I would kind of take pages out of Mortal Kombat 9, and I would make the storyline far more competitive, in which the storyline has an actual twist and feel to it, and it gives a really good, you know, nostalgic twist of like the characters that were once really great end up having like their rivalries, and then, you know, it goes into like a massive warfare of like Onaga being like the big bad boss, and then Shao Kahn and everybody else, you know, they basically want to have their run to basically like conquer and take over Earthrealm and all the other realms. So I definitely have like more to say, because I would probably like to just have like an actual discussion with you know, people of which I can, you know, discuss with. So I would say that's what I would do. So I mean, yeah, definitely you know, give me, you know, some criticism, you know, in terms of like how I would, you know, do better. I think I've pretty much hashed out what I needed to. I know that it was like a little bit all over the place, but I'm just kind of thinking more about like making every character a really interesting character, and then they would all have like their, you know, their feuds and battles of like what was preemptively shown to be like their, you know, their rising and then their downfall. So I would definitely make Shang Tsung, Onaga, and Shao Kahn, and you know, all the other villainous characters to be very prominent and strong. So I would definitely, you know, put that into like the story, and I think that's a really good, you know, strategy in terms of making like the storyline very competitive. So I think that's what I would do. You know, that's just something that I would, you know, set up. And yeah, so yeah, definitely let me know. And I appreciate anybody taking a look at this video, and shout out to the WaveReport. I would definitely like to get a show in with him, and definitely let me know what you guys think, man. So shout out to the MK community, well, to the real ones that actually care about Mortal Kombat, and hopefully this game can definitely get changed very, very soon for the future. And I would definitely, you know, like to chop it up more on this issue. So yeah, thank you very much, and I will see you guys later. Bye.